Clap. Woo! Oh, golly. Oh my gosh. You know what they say, don't trust a man in a turtleneck. Guys, welcome to episode 2 of Building a SaaS. Still have no idea exactly what we're going to build, but we will build. We will build. I promise we will figure out something to build. Today, rough rendition. Again, we're not getting too far into the nitty gritty. Not yet. We're going to talk bird's eye view of architectural things and from my understanding of stuff. So kind of crossing that threshold of senior engineering from my understanding is understanding systems design and how microservices kind of get pieced together. And in transparency, it's something I need to work on. So that is exactly what building this SaaS product is going to do, folks. You know, so let's do it together. Let's dive into some bird's eye design. The biggest thing I want to talk about is going to be those services, and we want to build out some kind of independent services from each other. So again, with TeamSync, it's still kind of all a mono repo. It's all one giant service, basically. And what I want to do, sorry guys, I actually went into a blank board. I don't want a board. I want a chart or a diagram. And what we want to do is just talk about some of these things. So for instance, this is going to be one of our tiny services that we build. But that's not relevant to this project. That was for another deal. So let's kind of verbalize. Let's ideate out loud. That's what a lot of this is going to be about, is just kind of bird's eye view, and then we'll have to wrestle with the code and figure it out together across time. For instance, I don't know Terraform or infrastructure as code. I don't yet at this point. I don't know how to use Golang. I don't at this point, but I do know JavaScript. I do know TypeScript. I do know some Node. I do know some Python. So we're gonna have some skill sets that I do know mixed with the things that I don't know, and we're gonna learn across the series. And I wanted to document this because I think it's an important thing to show. Hey guys, you might have a good set of skills, but you need to constantly embellish the skills, and then don't be intimidated if you don't know some skill set or something. Just learn. Be open to learn and figure it out. So let's kind of break down our application as a whole. Well, let's break down just small systems design real quick, and then it'll apply to the application. So this is going to be our web application, just bird's eye view. We'll put that on pause real quick. But let's talk about our small systems design. So let's say we have our front end. This would be our web page, like literally this is our web page. This entire Lucidchart web application. This is our website. Basically, to the users, it's our website, but to us software engineers, it's our front-end repo. So that's going to be our React or Next.js or Angular, or Nuxt or Vue, one of these things, right? And obviously our front end breaks down to multiple things. We have our stores, we have our components, we have our atoms, we have our, all these tiny things, API fetches, all that stuff. But quite frankly, for us engineers, we have our front end over here. Then our front end, we have a fancy dancy arrow, is gonna communicate with a API layer or a web server. And this web server, or really our API layer, basically our business logic, right? API layer, basically the code that will be kind of fetching from. Where's a line? I need a line. Let me move this face real quick. So this line right here is going to indicate kind of where the front end begins and where the back end begins, right? So kind of the definitive, here's where the front end begins and here's where the back end begins. So we have our web server or API layer, and then beyond that we also have, and still sometimes your front end, at least in my experience, you still should be somewhat competent in these things. Let me get some more music for you guys. And then from this point, we have our database. So this is like this simple bird's eye view of a systems design, right? So how it works, and this would be a model view presenter pattern, but how it works is we would, from the front end, let's say I log in and we have multiple services, right? But let's just say we have a Git post, like a to-do list. We're building a to-do list. So on the front end, I might have a function called fetch to-dos, and this fetch to-dos, it's going to be a request that then gets passed to the web server. The web server says, okay, I now need to look up all the code here that matches this function, right? This endpoint of whatever the endpoint might be of like fetch to-dos. So it looks up the fetch to-dos endpoint, and then we run the code. I need a little coding thing. Let's say const to-dos equals to-dos from database is what I'll say, or we'll say awaits to-dos from data from DB. So some function, some bit of code gets ran here after the backend receives this request. So this is our request. and boom. So, and the backend now knows, okay, take this request and I need to do this. And it says, okay, go fetch to-dos, and boom. And this code gets ran and goes to the database now and says, okay, well, I need to grab the to-dos, await the to-dos from the database. So the to-dos, or the database, cooks up all of our to-dos. So our to-dos, all of our data. And this has a ton of stuff with it too. It has a bunch of metadata, has our headers, at least the request has the headers. You might have an access token with it, but kind of ignore those things for now. But we have our to-dos as data. And let's say we have like a to-do as an object, and we have an ID of 1. And the name is, or we'll say to-do is, I don't know, go to groceries, or go study, right? And this gets returned. Sorry guys, having a hard time writing that. So this gets returned. Let me zoom in a smidge. This bit of data gets returned and becomes our, say with me, that's right folks, our response. And the response gets passed back to the front end. So boom. And then the front end can now show this list of to-dos in some front end component. Here's my to-do list component. And it would show to-do, basically, whatever list item, right, goes study. Boom. So this is kind of our rough architecture is we have a all of this happening in the back end, right? Like this is all happening and it gets even more convoluted, right? This is like really straightforward and simple. There's even stuff depending on how many requests are coming from the front end. You might have a proxy or a load balancer. We get a little more music for you guys. So you might have a load balancer that can handle, let's say this is a really big application. There's a billion users. Well, we need to balance it. So there's load balancers is what these would be called. And the load balancer basically would point the traffic. So, well, hold on. But before I get into that, though, let's stop. Let's stop for a sec, because I feel like this is going to convolute stuff. But basically, the point I'm trying to say is we can get more complicated if this is already isn't complicated enough. But we have a load balancer that can through a round robin algorithm can say, oh, go to this web server. This web server has so much traffic going to it. Go to a different web server. Go to a different, just to balance out. Let's say again, if there's 10,000 requests. So this system built here would work great for less than 1,000 requests a day. No problem. We could build this out, no problem. This would work fantastic. And let's keep this in mind real quick as one service, as like one deal. So this all would belong, guys. I want to layer this behind this. How do I do that? How do I push this back in a layer? But basically this is all going to exist as one container, if you will, and all of that will exist in our application as one kind of thing, as like our to-do service, right? So all of that would just be one item within our application, just to fetch to-dos on our to-do list. And then if we want to add other services within our project, within our web application, we might have to build other things. So yeah, it's like, oh, okay, what do we want to do on the front end? Maybe this is for authentication. Well, on the front end, we need a login list, right? Or login form with validation, all this stuff. But we can kind of ignore all this stuff. But basically, bird's eye view, we need a login form on the front end. And boom, what else do we need? Now we need to fetch to our, let me grab this arrow again. We need to go to our web server, right? Do an authentication process. So authentication API, right? So some sort of API that points to like OAuth or Clerk or some sort of authentication service, Cognito and AWS. And then we can also go from there and go to our database and see if these users if they exist in our database. If not, post them in our database, right? So then we would bundle this up as another service, right? Deal where a user could go through the same process, right? Of we built the login form. They're building a request on the front end to either log in or sign up, and boom. And depending if they're logging in, if we authenticate them, boom, post them to our database. So then we could post the user into our database. So then post user. Yeah, let's write it out actually, guys. I don't want to just cruise through it. Let's write it out. Sorry, I didn't mean to. So we have our front end, we have our back end, we have our line that defines kind of where front end engineers end and where back end engineers begin. We have the logic, right? So we'd have another endpoint that would basically, oh, that's not what we wanted. We wanted this one, but we could have another endpoint that basically, okay, I'll just write it out. We'll have another endpoint that basically checks if user exists. If yes, return auth token, some sort of access token, or just return user credentials and user credentials. So their password and all that stuff. Typically though, auth services, we're definitely going to outsource this. We'll use AWS Cognito more than likely for this. Else, if user doesn't exist, create user, right? Create the user, boom. So that would basically be our code on this API. We'll use AWS. AWS will handle all this because I don't want to deal with hashing and salting passwords and all that stuff and encrypting it, and it's a whole liability to deal with that. So there's already third-party services that handle it. We're going to do that. So, but we still need to build it with this in mind of how this is all going to work, because we'll have to integrate this part. And in what AWS will do, so from the front end, right, we have a request. Hey, let's log into the form. Basically, this request is going to come in here, say, okay, well, let's check if the user exists for the credentials I'm logging in with. If it does, go ahead and go to the database and give us a response. And this response will be a little access token with user credentials. Guys, and if all this sounds like jibber jab, don't even worry about it. It sounds like jibber jab still to me. So let's figure it out together, right? That's the biggest thing. So boom, response happens, and then we put it to the front end, and now the front end now knows user is authenticated. So then we can show them user is off. So now we could show them authenticated items, right? Authenticated material, whether it's some sort of page behind a auth wall, whether it's some sort of mid feature you could do, some sort of feature within the application you could access. But basically all of this, again, would exist as another separate service, separate from this original one over here for our to-do list. So let's say we're building a really fancy to-do application. This would all exist somewhere else in a box over here. And these separate services, these microservices, if you will, they are are going to build up our application. So this is my understanding of it, guys. So I'm trying to learn with you at the same time of teaching. So we have our auth service, right? And then we have our do service over here. And all these things, the reason why we want to have microservices is if one of these things break, hopefully it doesn't break other parts of the application, right? So obviously an auth service is kind of going to be the entry point to many of these other services. So the auth service typically has to work, but this is going to be kind of our entry point into our application. And then even if we take all of these things, this is where it gets even a little bit more convoluted, is all of these things can exist behind its own kind of service. So all of this stuff, our entire application, we may have another item going into it, guys, and we're gonna walk through all these pieces. We're gonna try to build out this whole thing together. So I know a lot of it can be convoluted, but even on the way in, we might have our own load balancer into our application here, and this load balancer could even go to our auth service, right? Make sure that we're authenticated before going to other services. So let me move my face real quick. Let me grab another arrow. Boom. And this is actually what Chester does really, really, really well. He's really talented at this. Let me grab another one of these arrows, because this is exactly how Chester has me querying APIs. Is user will get authenticated. So request comes in. Let me grab another arrow. I'll just grab this one. But you could see building a SaaS product all of a sudden now we're getting it's much more bigger than just like, oh hey, I want to build a thing that generates cover art or something or pixel art. It becomes a lot bigger than that. So we have a request comes into the load balancer. Load balancer pushes it off into our auth service. The auth service will give us an access token. We'll just leave it as A right there as the access token. This access token can go back to our load balancer or web server. Really, it should be a web server, I suppose. Guys, I'm trying to think how this would work too. And the access token could be queried with the user whenever they use the to-do service. So it sounds a little bit wild. So hold on. Let me try to reach this at another angle real quick. So let's pretend this is a person. I know it's a hexagon thing or a trapezoid looking thing, but let's pretend this is a oops. Or do they have persons? People? Person? Let's see. Guys, it'll make sense in a sec. People. Let's see. Nope. Okay, so I'll use this to represent person. Or what is this one? Additional icon right here? Perfect. That'll work great. So we have a person. Request comes in. Let me delete this little shape. Don't need it. Request comes in. I'm a person. I want to log into this to-do application. So boom, I log in. I get pushed to the auth service. This is all behind the scenes. The person has no idea this is all happening. The person logging in, they are now if their login goes successful, they are now parsed with parsed isn't the right word. They are now appended a access token with this session, only with the specific session. And this person with the access token, now when they go access the to-do service, and let's say they want to query one of these APIs to fetch a to-do, we can add authentication policies. So let's say we have two different people who, let's say one's a free service and the other's a paid service, right? Well, I'll explain that in a moment. But the point is now when we query this API, we can say, hold on, before you query the API, do you have an access token? Oh, you do? Okay, awesome. Now you can go ahead and go through with this thing. We know you're authenticated. We know you have access to our application. We know all these things. So let me cover up the to-do service one more time. Let's say we have a different user who is, maybe I can color this differently, potentially. Can I color it? I don't know if I can. But let's say we have person 2 who logs into our service, and they get passed to our auth service, and they get logged in, and they have not only an access token, but they have an admin access token. And the admin access token, or maybe it's not an admin, maybe it's like a premium user, right? Premium's user, right? And the premium user not only has access to the to-do service and those APIs, but maybe we have another service over here, and maybe it's like a to-do with friends service. Now, this would probably all exist in the to-do service. I just don't know. I don't know what other service to make real quick associated with this to-do list. So maybe it's a, How about this? It's a report service, right? Reporting service, or to-do analytics service, right? It's a fancy dancy list. And under this to-do analytics service, you have the same thing going on, a whole bunch of APIs, but it's exclusive to premium users. So if I'm a premium user, I can access this service and this service. But if I'm an authenticated user, but I'm a free user, I only have access to this service. So the way that we do that from a security standpoint is through access token. So I hope that kind of made sense. I hope that gave us some understanding, and guys, mind you, there's still some gaps in my knowledge. I'm going to relax on the music, but that is going to be episode 2. We're talking about microservice architecture just from a bird's eye systems design view. And these again are smaller systems, right? Where we're doing these kind of client to server to database architecture. But if we wanted to get more convoluted, believe me, we can, with like job queues, job servers, caching, all that stuff. And we're going to cover some of that, but just not right now. I recognize this is a lot to take in. So one thing at a time. But that's going to wrap up episode 2 of just kind of building a SaaS. In maybe ours is to-do list, maybe it's something else, but we're definitely going to need a few of these things from this bird's eye view. Is we're going to need an auth service, and we're going to need some sort of querying to a list type behavior, more than likely. And then I'm sure we'll have some sort of analytics service as well. But the point is we have a bird's eye view now of kind of how micro architecture works. And yeah, let's kind of gear up for episode 3. Guys, thank you so much for watching.